Okay.
Because I got to review these.
How's that?
I can hear you.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Getting a lot of
Um,
feedback though.
okay, hang on. Better?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Welcome to episode 66 of Farms and Markets. Today we are talking about the new RMD age, current market conditions, and more lightning round questions at the end. For 30 years, Americans have had to start taking money out of their IRAs and 401ks at the age of 70 and a half until the 2019 Secure Act pushed the age back to 72. Now, the second Secure Act that was passed late last year will move that age back further to age 73 and eventually push it all the way back to age 75 by 2033. The idea is to presumably allow retirees to keep more of their savings invested for longer and defer tax until even later in life. Is pushing back the RMD age as helpful as it seems, and do you think it's good policy?
So yeah, I think it's good policy. I think it's a realization that people are living longer. When a lot of these retirement programs, whether we're talking like Social Security or 401ks instituted decades ago, um, people didn't live pretty routinely into their 90s. But for people our age and younger, increasingly we're going to, even older Americans are finding they're risking outliving their savings. So if this helps people push back uh, the date where they have to start drawing on the savings, then I think it's fine. Another perspective, though, is I think this is a precursor to what eventually is going to happen. Um, Systems like Social Security and Medicare were built on the assumption that people did not live until they were 90 and that they had like 4 kids. And neither of those have turned out to be true in the 21st century. So I think this is the early stages of maybe laying the groundwork for pushing out retirement ages on both of those programs, perhaps. They're going to have to do something about them one way or another here in about a decade anyways. So I think the groundwork is being laid for them to do something along those lines.
I think these new RMD ages are more favorable than the old ages, just comparing them side by side. However, it's not like Congress is just doting upon us taxpayers because they really like us. Remember, Congress is the reason why RMDs and taxes on these investments exist in the first place. So, what I think they're doing is they're just easing up on some of the rules they already created and giving IRA owners options to delay RMDs by a few years. Now, that's really all that's going on. It can benefit some IRA owners. It gives people more time to do Roth conversions if they want to, or let their IRAs grow if they don't need the income in retirement. It can also let those using IRAs as wealth transfer vehicles to delay paying taxes on them if their beneficiaries happen to be in a lower tax bracket. So there are some advantages, but for the majority of the population, it'll probably mostly be a non-event. The Treasury Department estimated that only 20% of seniors actually take the minimum RMD, while the rest withdraw much more. So having a later RMD age may not even be taken advantage of by most of the population. And as Newton's third law of motion states, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. This is no different. A later RMD age doesn't have doesn't it's not without any drawbacks. RMDs are based on both the account balance at the end of each year and the account owner's life expectancy. So by delaying RMDs, these retirees are going to be forced to make bigger withdrawals from an account that's probably going to be bigger because it's had more time to grow. Now, this can have tax implications. It could bump someone into a higher tax bracket, or maybe make more of their Social Security benefits taxable, or might even force them to pay higher Medicare premiums. So it's good to have the option to take your RMDs at a later age, but make sure you do your due diligence on whether it makes sense for you or not.
I agree. Everything you said is pretty much spot on because for some subset of folks that do like really intensive planning and have a need for really intensive planning, moving that RMD age back is helpful because you don't have to do something. When you don't have to do something, it makes it easier for planning purposes. But like Drew pointed out, 80% of people are going to take more than their RMD amount before they reach their required minimum, before they reach the required starting date. So it's probably not going to have that much impact. The same thing with Social Security is that only some staggering amount of people, I think it's close to 90%, start taking their Social Security benefits at the age of 62. Instead, and like I think it gets down to under 5% actually wait to age 70 before they actually start taking their Social Security benefits, which is fine. I mean, I'm not saying it's good to do it one way or the other, but like Drew said, is that for most people this is not going to affect them. But if you are one of these people where you are going to try and push it back to the very last minute, it makes those last minute distributions bigger, which has tax implications. So ideally, when you get into your mid 50s and your 60s, you want to start doing some planning on how you're going to take those out to try and minimize taxes and consequences of Social Security and Medicare. So, but and it has some budget implications for Congress as well. Some of this, they're not even going to increase the RMD age to 75 for 10 years, and that's just so they can the next 10 years of worth of budget gets balanced out by people paying taxes at the age of 73. When you push that all the way back to age 75, all of a sudden you're not getting the same amount of tax revenue as you were when people had to take them at 73 or 70. So you're kind of delaying some of those tax revenues. But I will say is that with the inherited IRAs, they basically made it where everybody has to essentially clear out their inherited IRA at 10 years. So I think that was step one, is to make sure is that we're going to push the RMD age back, but for the people who inherit these IRAs, we're going to force you to get the money out in 10 years, and that's where we're going to make up the extra revenue. So like kind of like Alex said, obviously this was they set us up for it in the first Secure Act. They pushed the RMD age back in the second, and they're probably laying some groundwork for Social Security, like Alex said. All right, let's see here. All right. If you follow financial news or look at sentiment measures, you might think that things are really, really bad. The latest economic data are mixed, with some November readings coming in worse than expected. The consensus view is that things aren't good and are about to get worse, with many penciling in recession next year, so 2024. What do you make of the current market conditions?
Well, it's nobody has a crystal ball, but we did have, although I guess the Biden administration would disagree, we did have technically a very slight, mild recession last year, 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth. I don't know if we'll see negative GDP growth next year, but the Federal Reserve is certainly trying to get that to happen. They're using interest rates, and I'm always surprised when people are shocked when they continue doing exactly what they told you they were going to do. But they're using interest rate policy to try and slow the economy down, to reduce demand, to try and get inflation under control. As long as inflation remains outside the bounds where they want to be, which they say is 2 to 3%, I fully expect the Federal Reserve to continue their interest rate policy, either raising them little by little, or once they're done, leaving them there for a while, to try and, like I said, get inflation under control. They want it in the 2 to 3% range going forward. Whether or not, again, that will cause an actual recession, don't know. What that probably means for the stocks in general is when interest rates go up and continue to go up, it makes fixed income assets, like new issued treasuries, for example, more attractive, and stocks a little less attractive. So usually when they raise rates, stocks don't react too well. That's pretty much what we've seen. They've just been muddling along as the Federal Reserve continues to raise rates. So will we get another recession? Maybe. I guess it depends on your definition of recession. Will the market be thrilled about more interest rate hikes? Well, they haven't been so far. So if rates keep going up, I'm not sure we should expect much different from the market.
I think Alex said it. Nobody has a crystal ball. But the thing is, people really, really want the news and their professionals to have a crystal ball. They want to think that people have a crystal ball. There's a saying in this industry that the only thing worse than bad news is uncertainty. And that's kind of where we're at now. There's a lot of uncertainty, and people are almost grasping to this recession that's going to happen allegedly in 2023, 2024, just because it's easier to deal with than, well, we don't know. My dad's referenced the weather rock at Boy Scout camps before. Anyone who's been to Boy Scout camp remembers the weather rock. It's this rock that's hanging from a stick. And basically, there's a sign that says weather rock. If the rock is dry, it's sunny. If the rock is wet, it's rainy. If the rock is moving, it's windy. And if the rock is gone, there's a hurricane. That's kind of how you need to approach the current market conditions. Instead of making predictions and basing your investment objectives on what you think is going to happen, deal with what's going on now, and just remember to follow the QDI rules: buy quality, diversify, buy things that are appropriate, and be wise with the income. That's as complicated as it really needs to be.
Yeah, no, well said. Going forward, I think the biggest thing that is going to drive market performance is when is the Fed going to slow and stop the pace of rate increases,
Yeah.
followed by what people are going to be paying close attention to. That is what the Fed is predicting going to happen actually lining up with reality, because we got this right after we got through COVID, and everybody had this anticipation that inflation was going to get really high, and the Federal Reserve was slow in forecasting high inflation rates, and everybody kind of knew there was this big disconnect, and I think you could see that in the market. So going forward, we're looking at economic data that's going to stop the Fed from raising interest rates, and then we're also going to make sure that what they're saying is actually lining up with reality. Because if it doesn't, then things are all bets are off at that point. The last point is everybody does have this expectation that things are going to get worse, which sets us up for, if there's any good news, if we start seeing good news out of technology companies, we start seeing that inflation is coming way down, I think that's going to have a positive impact on the market, because everybody's been expecting bad data. That's what's been priced in right now. And then if we start getting good news, that could just, like letting go of a rubber band, send the market the other way. I don't know that that's going to happen anytime soon, but I think that the expectations of poor performance, high inflation have been so priced in, and that's been what you've been reading in the headlines so much, that if we start getting good news, the markets are going to start reacting to that more than they are expecting the bad news.
Even if markets do turn sour or continue to be sour, it'll be interesting to see how investors react, because there's the cycle of market performance, and there's also the cycle of market or investors' emotion. And there's a point where, at its peak, investors are excited, and then things change, and they become fearful. They're in denial. They become desperate, and at a certain point, they just capitulate, and they say, "Okay, this is the market. It's really, really bad." And then they're just waiting for the market to recover. So it'll be interesting to compare market or investors' behavior to market performance as well.
Yeah. And we've been through like these kind of like these mini cycles over the last 3 months, where we get inflation data that's not what we wanted, and then we look forward to the next Federal Reserve meeting where we think they're going to taper interest rate hikes, so things go up. The Federal Reserve, like Alex says, does exactly what it said it was going to do. Things go down, and then somebody's like, "Hey, looked at the Fed minutes. I think maybe they're going to do it this time." And we've been through that like 3 times now, and hopefully they'll just reach that phase of complacency, like Drew said. We'll just wait and see what happens, instead of reacting on
Right.
trying to read the tea leaves of the Fed minutes.
Exactly. Just markets are bad, and eventually they'll get better. We just don't know when.
Right.
All right, let's move on to the lightning round. All right, bank robberies are becoming a thing of the past in cashless Denmark, as the Nordic country, it recorded its first year of zero holdups in 2022. The Danes increasingly use cards and payment apps on their smartphones for transactions, causing cash withdrawals to drop by about 3/4 over the last 6 years. According to the central bank, so cash withdrawals have dropped by about 3/4 of the last 6 years, according to their central bank. Falling cash transactions have pushed banks into trimming costs by pulling cash services from most branches. So it sounds like the Danish banks make some money off of cash transactions, and because there hasn't been then, they've had to force, because holding money, it costs money to protect it and like do accounting on it and stuff like that. So it sounds like they're holding less cash in Danish banks. Do you think bank robberies will become a thing of the past?
In the United States, I tend to think that cash is going to be around for a while. It's hard to compare, a larger, less trusting population to a relatively small, homogenous European population. I think a lot of people in the U.S. are less trustful of banks than people in Denmark are, so I think they'll try and do cash transactions more frequently. But in the long term, perhaps bank robberies as we know them, guys sticking a gun in somebody's face, may disappear, but the bank will just get hacked and the money stolen that way.
I think Alex is right. I think that the cartoon version of the guy in the mask with the bag of with the big burlap sack with a dollar sign on it going into a bank and jacking it up. In theory, yeah, that'll probably be a thing of the past, but I think there'll be other things that replace it. There'll probably be more fraud, in more hackers, things like that, more cyber threats. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot less horse robberies than there were in the 19th century. So yeah, I think there could be less bank robberies with less cash, but I think it'll be replaced by something. Crime's not going to go away, or criminals aren't going to go away, but the crime could change, I suppose.
Right. Yeah, bank robberies aren't going to go away. The one where you walk into the bank with a gun and a mask on, that will go away. But you have Fort Gox, the crypto thing, got hacked, like Alex said. You're just getting virtual bank robberies. And then I guess you could throw Sam Bankman-Fried into the mix, which is yeah. I guess you could consider that a bank robbery. You could also classify it as a bunch of other things, but yeah, I was shocked that I didn't know people still went into banks and like did the old-fashioned hold-up. I didn't. I guess there's some hardcore traditionalists out there that that don't want to let go of the past, but I mean, I thought the security in banks was like so good at this point that it would be pretty hard to like get away with it. I don't know. All right. So, activists with the climate change focus group Just Stop Oil have been throwing tomato soup on famous art paintings, including Van Gogh's Sunflowers. The activists, so after they throw tomato soup on a painting, the activists glue themselves to the wall under the painting with the aim of drawing attention to climate change. So at this point, do you think lack of attention is climate change's problem at this point? I mean, do you think they need to throw tomato soup on paintings to draw attention to it?
No. There's a lot of charities out there that may have existed at one point for a good reason to, bring attention to a cause or an issue that people didn't know about. But with climate change, scientists have been talking about it for 50, 60 years. I do not think that, number one, that a lack of attention is the issue. Number two, the people who seem most likely to enjoy these kind of like art galleries and displays and whatnot that they're vandalizing seem like they're already probably aware of climate change. So I'm wondering if it's just, fighting the wrong crowd.
I had never heard of climate change until I saw tomato soup getting thrown on that Van Gogh paint. I'm a changed man. I completely, bought a Prius. I agree with Alex. No, it's not going to do anything. They're just fighting for attention. Everyone knows about climate change, and people that want to buy into it and make a change are already doing so, probably. I don't think vandalizing art is going to get this across the goal line.
Yeah. So, I listened to a podcast called Today Explained, and apparently they did a survey of the effectiveness of this kind of activism, and 80% of people on both sides of Democrat, Republicans, whether you're pro climate change or you're you think it's like a hoax. 80% of the mix of people basically said they found, you know, the people of Just Stop Oil, like they viewed them in, they didn't like them. You know, they didn't. Nobody really wants to see art, like famous art, get vandalized. Even though I did go on to learn that, like with Van Gogh's sunflowers, I guess museums put like a piece of glass in front of the actual painting, which is smart. You know, just so it doesn't get damaged while it's viewing. So I don't know if these people knew it, but when you dump the tomato sauce on it, it's not actually ruining the, or at least in Van Gogh's sunflower case, you know, they didn't actually ruin the art. It was protected by some like almost, you know, very, you know, clear piece of glass that you can't really tell is there. So whether the activists knew that was there or not, I don't know if that changes much. But yeah, I don't think the issue is we need more attention. I think we just need more solutions. You know, people are doing, you know, stuff with solar. People are doing stuff with cars. You know, it's like budgeting. You know, everybody knows about it. You know, but nobody does it for various reasons. So, and you know, people seem like they're working on it.
I don't know. Maybe we should all go streak across a soccer field during the World Cup to bring attention to budgeting.
Maybe, yeah. That can be what Cocoa Enterprises is famous for. Yeah. Okay, all right, last one. So, recent cold snap in Montana has made many animal owners putting jackets on their horses, shoes on their dogs, and heat lamps in their barns. At what temperature do you start bundling your animals up? I mean, do you put jackets on your cats or sweaters on your cats, Alex?
No, usually with our cats, they like to go outside up until the point where it's wet or frozen on the ground. Right now, if I were to open the door and ask if they want to go outside, they'll just look and then they won't. So I don't think we are going to be dressing them up in anything.
I've been taking care of my dad's farm animals while he's been in Japan for the last 2 or 3 weeks, and we had that cold snap, and that was pretty rough. I put a space heater in the stables, and you know, I tried to make sure they were comfortable. I fed them in their stables instead of making them go outside, kept their water from freezing. But no, I didn't put on any sweaters or goat blankets. They actually make them, as a matter of fact. But yeah, when it gets really cold, I just I try to make them as comfortable as possible, up to putting a coat on them.
Yeah. Same here. Chicken coop, you know, I didn't put a light in the coop this year until it got below freezing, and I check on them. They seem fine, but yeah, at that point I was just like, all right, I put the light in. They seem to enjoy it, but at that point, I mean, they basically took care of themselves. You know, this is probably kind of mean, but I enjoy it when, you know, my dog has trouble walking on the ground because it's so cold. Because when I take him out to go do his business in the morning, you know, we don't have to stop and, you know, bark at squirrels, and he tries to get away from me so he can run around the yard. He just goes outside, does what he needs to do, and then we go back inside. And it's been it's a kind of a time saver. So I have not been putting shoes on my dog. All right, that's it for episode 66. We'll see you again next week.